We are at 30 through 21 on our Frenzy's top 50 games of the 2024 college football season on this beautiful, beautiful Thursday afternoon. We just got done wrapping up, a couple of days ago, we dropped it 201 of Pigskin Frenzy. This is episode 202, but 201 had 40 through 31 of our Frenzy's top 50 games of the 2024 season. And let me go on and tell you something. We had some interesting games in there. Some of them probably could have been in this list, but we have an exclusive list for these games. And let me go on and tell you something. This list and this selection, 30 through 21, has got some games that you're going to make you scratch your head and go, oh, we probably should have put that a little bit higher. But we also have games that are higher than this. What goes into this? Well, magnitude of the game, how the game turned out, how both teams played, the hype around it, the controversial calls behind it, the storm, the rushing, the fans, are they energetic with it, the views, the ratings, and they draw a bunch of different atmospheres, all the key ingredients, championship games included, all key ingredients to make this game and these selection of games where they are at. That's what we base and judge our metric off of. We judge it off of a lot of different stuff, and we're just counting down until we get to number one, which is next Thursday, by the way, next Thursday, March 6th. But it is February 27th. Episode 202 of Pigskin Frenzy, and welcome to Pigskin Frenzy on this beautiful Thursday afternoon. Thank you for joining us. I'm Joel Norris, and whether you're watching on YouTube, listening on Spotify, listening on Podbean, or listening on Apple, a big thank you for taking some time out of your Thursday to just sit back, watch, and listen to some college football coverage presented by me. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, like each episode, leave comments down below. Spotify, Podbean, and Apple, all you got to do is just share around with others and follow on there as well. X and Instagram, just type in Pigskin Frenzy. Follow like the pages there. You're going to get episode updates, news and highlights from across college and college football. You're going to get trivia questions on Instagram stories, go and answer today's college football question, as well as all things up to date for Pigskin Frenzy. Guys, our website's www.pigskinfrenzy.weebly.com. There you will find all things up to date for Pigskin Frenzy. Home and About Me page. Learn more about me as your podcast host. There's a contact info down below. I will answer your question on air or off air if need be. Name, email, question. I'll answer it on air or off air if need be. There is also our platforms page, all the platforms I just mentioned. Click on which one's your favorite, platform for your favorite listening style of the show. Just named all of them, as well as our store and platforms page or affiliations page. More on that coming soon. Guys, Pigskin Frenzy episode 202 is in effect right now. Guys, welcome, and got 46, about to be at 4,600 listeners. Guys, a big thank you for tuning in each and every Tuesday and Thursday and every week, streaming new episodes on all platforms. Just tune in and listen to some Pigskin Frenzy and some college football coverage. We got a lot to go over. And when I mean a lot to go over, I mean a lot to go over. We have a lot of stuff that we're going to talk about, and it really just drives the point home of just, the games and the magnitude. And that's why we do these selection shows and these list shows of where these games are ranked. Now, to top it off of them last week, give you some cliff notes. We already have 40 through 31 posted yesterday. Go and check that out. X and Instagram at Pigskin_Frenzy. Like each post. But if you want to listen to the episode, listen to 201, because I had 40 through 31 on that one. We had games like Texas and Texas A&M. Why was that 40? Because it was hype. Don't get me wrong. Yes. But Texas sort of dominated them. And it didn't bleed into the hype like the other games. And the other games were not all the way hype, but they ended up being delivered in a magnitude of games where, okay, this is a monumental upset. How can this not be number 3 or 15 or whatever, right? Ahead of that game. So, and the way the games were played as well, it comes into a big effect on how these games are judged. So we're going to get into 30 right now without any big further ado, right? 30 through 21 of Frenzy's top 50 games of the 2024 college football season. Kicking it off with number 30, Illinois and Purdue. Illinois and Purdue, number 30. Illinois defeated Purdue 50-49 in overtime. Purdue lost 11 games, and you're going to think they were awful. Why in the heck did you end up putting them in a game in a select, like in a list of this game and this rankings of this magnitude. Let me go and tell you something. They played Illinois close. Illinois is the Citrus Bowl champion, a future Citrus Bowl champion, may I add you, for this season, and went 10-3. So yeah, you played them. You only lost by a point, but I'm going to put them in this game because the game was epic. The game was, magnitude of it was good. It was the crowd. Excuse me, was electric. If you want to look at Illinois and the points being scored 50-49 in overtime, that was quite insane. I mean, Luke Altmaier had 3 touchdowns, 379 yards in the game. He was 20 for 34. Josh McCray had 2 touchdowns, 78 yards, and 16 carries. This was probably one of the only games that Ryan Walters coached well in. He ended up getting let go, unfortunately, at the end of the season, but this is one of the only games where he actually coached well in. So if you want to look at, Ryan Brown, Purdue's quarterback, 3 touchdowns, 297 yards, 18 for 26. Ryan Brown also had 118 yards rushing and 17 carries as a quarterback. So he went off in this ball game. Devin Mockabee had 102 yards, a touchdown, 11 carries, and Branch had a 3-yard touchdown run. Max Clare, Max Clare, the now transfer tight end from going to Ohio State entering 2025. He had 133 yards, 6 receptions. Tibbs had 1 touchdown, 51 yards, and 4 receptions. And both defenses were, not as effective because they kept just scoring points. But Illinois got the last laugh on defense and going into overtime and ended up winning the game. This was just the elevation of how Illinois was. They played a lot of teams close that they really weren't supposed to play close. And then they got beat by the teams that were supposed to get beat, but they also played teams and beat teams that they weren't supposed to beat either. Illinois was a testament of a true team that, no one really looked at them, and we looked past them, and everybody looked past Illinois, but Illinois showed a lot of people that we were pretty freaking good this year. So Illinois, to Brett Bielema, and to his credit, they got the job done. All hands on deck with Brett Bielema in Illinois in 2025. I'm curious to see what Altmaier is going to do in 2025. And I'm curious to see what Purdue's going to look like now that Ryan Walters is not there. I'm curious to see what Barry Odom's system is going to have an effect for Purdue. And as a matter of fact, we may do a spring outlook on Purdue because I think it's an interesting study on what's going on in West Lafayette, Indiana with Purdue and Barry Odom now being the head coach there. I think it's a very, very interesting story. You go from Ryan Walters to Barry Odom, but Barry Odom coming off of a highly successful couple of year runs at UNLV. So we have that in store as well. Here's the deal. Illinois in this ball game they were just going back and forth and trading and blows. If you want to look at the scorecard of this game as well, Illinois had a 10-point lead in the first quarter, 14-3 ended up being, it was, if I remember correctly, it was 24-3 going into halftime. Illinois was leading. And then Purdue goes on a 17-3 run in the third quarter, right? It was 27. They had 27 points. And then at the end of the third, it was 27-24. And you're thinking, how the heck did Ryan Walters and Purdue come back make it 7, on a 17-3 run in the third quarter, right? And then Purdue ended up scoring 23 more points, and Illinois ended up scoring 16. So they went into overtime, and then in overtime, Purdue got a touchdown, only scored 6, and then Illinois got the touchdown, got the extra point, 7, 50-49 final score. In this one, it was back and forth, and this one was a game where Purdue maybe, if you want to think about it, maybe this could have saved Ryan Walters' job. I don't know that. You may think I'm sounding crazy saying that, but this is one that got away from Purdue. But Illinois, this was just a true testament of how Illinois was just a really good team. So, final score, 50-49, Illinois defeated Purdue. This was 30 on my list. I think 30 was Illinois and Purdue. 50-49, Illinois defeated Purdue. Guys, keep plugging into Pigskin Frenzy on all platforms. Thank you for just keeping on tuning in. 4,600 listeners, in counting, coming in for this podcast. We're about to be at 4,600 listeners and counting. So big thank you there. Shout out to everybody who's following on X and Instagram. Keep plugging it in. I'm going to have this list out tomorrow, which is Friday, on X and Instagram for 30 through 21, in the year of our Lord, 2025 of January. Oh, I'm sorry, February 28th, the last day of February as we inch closer to March. So number 29 on this list, Clemson versus Pitt. I covered this game, and Clemson versus Pitt was a very interesting game. After this game, this is where the wheels fell off, I think. I think this is where the wheels fell off for Pitt. Pitt ended up getting beat in a lot of areas. I think Pitt was hoisting a comeback as Clemson was doing really well in this ball game, and this was at Pitt. And then they were trying to mount a comeback. They let Cade Klubnik score late, a big touchdown run. Eli Holston was trying to come back. He got into the red zone, going for the ball, going for a touchdown. Time ran out, and it was an incomplete pass. So close. Big defensive stop by the Clemson Tigers, and Clemson ended up routing Pitt 24-20 in this ball game. You're thinking Clemson was up on Pitt. You're thinking that. And then you think in the second half, you're thinking, how the heck did this happen, right? How did this happen? There's a lot of games, trust me, y'all, that I have said, why the heck did this happen? This wasn't supposed to happen. Like, you had this in the bag, and it just ended up just being, okay, we're going to end up, right? We're going to end up coming back. They're going to end up coming back, and it just turns into a complete, chaos type of second half. That's just how the sport of college football is. Let's get on the notes device here and talk about this Clemson and Pitt game, because I thought it was electric. I thought it was fun. I thought it was a highly contested game in the second half. I mean, the first half for sure. I mean, I will say, look, first quarter, it was 7-7. They were tied. Then it ended up being 17-7 going into halftime. They didn't score any points in the third quarter. And then Pitt scored 13, outscored Clemson 13-7 in the fourth. But it doesn't matter because Clemson still had the lead or was about to have the lead. Pitt got the lead late, and then Clemson scored with a big touchdown run by Cade Klubnik, and he used his legs. Cade Klubnik is probably going to be one of the top names in quarterback-wise coming back in college football in 2025. It's because he knows how to win, and he's developed a lot better through the passing game. But not only that, his legs, man. I think his legs have bailed Clemson's offense, especially last season, out of a lot of games. I think Pitt was one of them. I think that I wouldn't say Louisville because they lost Louisville, but he ran the ball quite well. I think he ran the ball well against SMU, and he bailed him out a lot in a lot of situations with his legs. I think that's what's going to happen this year. I think he's going to be developed as a passer. He's been developed as a passer, and he's shown tremendous development as Clemson's quarterback, and this is what I've been wanting to see from Cade Klubnik, and he showed it in this game. 24-20 was the final score. Clemson's defense wasn't up to par. Tom Allen's defense sure will be this season, I think, but they still fought, and this is a back-and-forth game. Eli Holston and Pat Narduzzi weren't going quietly into the night. If you want to look at Pitt stats in this game, Eli Holston did not play this game. It was Nate Yarnell. I thought it was Eli Holston. Nate Yarnell, 350, a touchdown, 34 for 54. If you want to look at Reed has 68 yards, 14 carries. Carter had a touchdown, 31 yards. Yarnell played the best that he can. I think that Clemson just had a little bit more juice on defense at the very end than Pitt and had on offense at the very end, and they just stopped them, right? It was a classic of a game, and then the wheels fell off for Pitt, and then Pitt went down after that. This ended Pitt's hopes, unfortunately, but Pitt was doing really, really well in the season. They were, at first, they only had 2 losses, and then they had 3 losses after this game. 24-20 was the final score of this ball game. I thought it was a very highly octane contest, and Clemson got the win. So Clemson went on to the ACC championship, to everyone's shock. We're going to talk about Syracuse and Miami soon. And to everyone's shock, Clemson and Pitt was a top game of our list, at least, because it was a very interesting contest until the very end. 24-20 was the final score. Number 29, Clemson versus Pitt on Frenzy's rankings, top 50 rankings for the 2024 college football season. Number 28, the Holy War, BYU versus Utah. The ninth time they've played each other, the ninth time they played the Holy War, or in the Big 12 at least. BYU, when Utah's in the Big 12, it doesn't matter. BYU defeated Utah 22-21 in this ball game. BYU was a solid football team. We're just now starting to talk about BYU. It was a close game through and through, but BYU just came out on top. Utah is a team that is a what could have been team, especially in the Big 12. They had a lot of problems. Injuries were a part of it, but they had a lot of problems just starting out. And it was just a what could have been type season for Utah. And as I look at the stats here for BYU and Utah, 22 for 21, right? 22 and 21. BYU 22. They went back to being undefeated, 9-0. Utah 4-5. But BYU, by the time this season has happened, they kept just getting away with it and getting away with it. I'm touching the microphone, getting away with it and getting away with it. They just kept getting away with it. As in they kept, you know how in some games and throughout the season with teams where it's like, okay, they're dominant at first, but then they start becoming more flawed, and then they start escaping with wins, barely escaping with wins, getting a point with a win. That was BYU, and BYU was dominant at first, and then it started getting a little bit closer. Then they started escaping with wins. Then they started winning by a point, and it just kept going and going, and then they finally lost. And it was really one of those things where I looked at it, I was like, oh, yeah, BYU's for sure going to lose. But it was a close back-and-forth game. Reslav had 219 yards, 15 for 33. Martin has 68 yards, 11 carries. Utah, though, Rose for Utah, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, 112 yards, 22 for 21. Isaac Wilson was out. Bernard, 78 yards, 17 carries. Rose had 55 yards, 7 carries. It was just a back-and-forth game. Defensively was good. It was just a back-and-forth game. It had a lot of penalties involved in this game as well. 90 yards, 10 penalties for Utah, 10 penalties and 67 yards for BYU. It showed that this game was a little bit sloppy in the around some, but it created some magic at the end because BYU scored late, got the win, and escaped with a 1-point victory. It was back and forth, very intense, heated rivalry, controversial calls as well, and it was just a very, very heightened Holy War type game in this one. That's why it's 28 on my list. I think BYU has got quite a couple of games and on this list and in this selection that are top games on our list, even though they didn't, win, go to the playoffs or win the Big 12. It was one of those things where you look and you're thinking, okay, they still got some top games. They still played some memorable games in the season. So 22-21 was the final score. BYU defeated Utah. BYU versus Utah was number 28 on our list. Number 27, Texas and Vandy. Texas versus Vanderbilt. I told you that we're going to have more Vanderbilt games on this one, and we're still going to have more Vanderbilt games on this list. Texas versus Vanderbilt. This game is better than the Lone Star Showdown, and you're going to sit there and think, are you insane? So, no. The hype around it wasn't bigger than the Lone Star Showdown. No, but I will tell you this. It sure as heck was a better game in Nashville. Vandy gave it all they had. And in fact, if you were underestimating Vandy in each game this season, you're probably going to lose. And that's okay. A lot of people have. A lot of people underestimated and doubted Vandy. Kentucky lost to Vandy because Kentucky and Auburn lost to Vandy. Missouri almost lost to Vanderbilt, which, by the way, we're going to get into that here in a little bit. Now, I wouldn't say a little bit, but I mean at least in the top, 20 through 11, that is in that section. Spoiler alert, because I thought Vanderbilt and Missouri was a heck of a game. Look, Texas was a solid team coming in, and you're thinking, okay, they're coming in off of Texas and Vandy coming in off of out of a tough game. As I look at my notes here, coming off of a tough game, coming off of a tough game against Georgia because they lost to Georgia, and it was tough. They went 7-1, And then you were like, oh, man, now Vandy's thinking, oh, man, now they're going to be upset and angry and amped up. And they were a little bit, but Vanderbilt kept fighting, man. They kept fighting, and Pavia is a warrior, so you wouldn't expect anything less. 27-24 was the final score. Texas did win, but it was a fight. 14-7 in the first quarter, and then it was 7-3. It was 21-10 Texas at the half, and then Vandy came out 7-3, and then it ended up being, I think it ended up being, if I am not mistaken, 24-17, and then it ended up being 27-24, and that's how the game ended. But it was 27-17, and Vanderbilt was making a comeback. Diego Pavia scored late. They didn't get the onside kick. It was back and forth. Everybody was on the edge of their seats. Can Vandy come back and complete a history-making comeback? And they didn't. They didn't end up getting the onside kick. But I will tell you this, Vanderbilt showed heart and physicality late in that game and showed that they could literally can compete with anyone on any given day. It doesn't matter if they're not the strongest or the toughest. Vanderbilt is going to find a way to compete with you and try to punch you in the mouth, and you're going to get Vandy's best. Vanderbilt is a team that you cannot take lightly anymore. Clark Lee is doing something up there, and I'm not joking when I say this. Clark Lee is doing something up there that is not like your typical Vandy. The last time we've seen Vanderbilt probably this intense, and probably I'm hyping them up even more going into this season, was probably when James Franklin was there, and that was a long time ago. That was before Pigskin Frenzy even was ever a thought, okay? So I'm just letting you guys know, Vanderbilt is a team that you need to pay attention to. Obviously, Texas is, but this game was a classic. Quinn Ewers did his best. They were coming off of a loss, and they really needed a win. Texas did against a quality, I will say quality because they were a quality opponent in Vandy. They really needed it. Vandy was ranked in this game, by the way. It was a ranked matchup, top 25 matchup, and I covered this ball game. Texas needed it. They really needed it coming off that huge loss against Georgia. It was like, it was a 15, 16-point loss against Georgia at home. So they needed it. And they got the win. Quinn Ewers did his best. 3 touchdowns, 288 yards, 27 for 37. He had only 2 blemishes, in which was 2 picks, which were not good. He, kind of was rattled a little bit. Wisner had 79 yards, 17 carries. I think the running game kind of did tire him out a little bit. Moore had 2 touchdowns, 97 yards, 6 receptions. And then Matthew Golden had 1 touchdown, but Matthew Golden didn't come in until, late in the game. But that's here or there. So 27-24 was the final score. Texas defeated Vanderbilt. Number 27, Texas versus Vanderbilt, is on our list at 27. Vanderbilt's a quality opponent. We're going to have more Vandy games because this game was heightened. The magnitude of the game, we were on its heels until the very end, and it was back and forth. So well done, Vandy, landing another spot on our list. Number 26, BYU versus Kansas. BYU versus Kansas. This was BYU's first loss. Kansas upsetted them. BYU got upset. Kansas defeated them 17-13. Off of a really, really courageous punt. A pooch punt. And Kansas somehow got the ball back. And it was just, BYU wasn't ready for it. Kansas got the ball back. And then all of a sudden they were like, oh, shoot, we're on its heels. And then I was like, wait, what? And I checked the score. I'm like, wait, what? Kansas is beating BYU. I got to tune into this. And then I tuned into it, and the inevitable happened. It was like I said before, it was just going to come close, coming closer, and BYU was finally going to lose. Kansas was a team that was upsetting people and or at least coming close to upsetting people. I think that what they have done all year, Kansas, is they are better, honestly, than what their record has shown. They went 5-7, but Lance Leipold has shown a lot better. Has shown this team that they're a lot better than what they're advertised are. I think they got hurt and they were beat up in a lot of games, but when they weren't beat up and they were on their A game, they ended up having a good second half of the season and ended up beating teams like BYU and upsetting some teams and coming close to ruining seasons. They beat Colorado. I mean, they beat Colorado, dude. I mean, if you want to look at what Kansas has done, Kansas gave Colorado humble pie. They also gave BYU humble pie, ended their undefeated streak. So, yeah, Kansas was a solid football team in the second half of the season, and they showed that in this ball game. Everybody was on its heels. An undefeated was about to go down, and that is why this game is number 26 and how big it was, because of the magnitude of the game. The hype around it, it drew. The ingredients were there for an upset, and that's why it's a top-tier game. It's what college football is all about. People want to see, I wouldn't say pretenders, right? But they want to see if contenders can hold up. But it's even more satisfying to see if contenders get upset. And I think that was the issue right here. That was the big thing here for Kansas and BYU, and that's why this game was so special. So Kansas defeated BYU 17-13. BYU versus Kansas was number 26 on our list. It was an electrifying game. Go back and watch highlights of it. It was quite awesome. Number 25, Navy versus Oklahoma in the Armed Forces Bowl. We have our first bowl game in our selection, Navy versus Oklahoma. If I were to tell you that Navy versus Oklahoma happened and then Navy beat Oklahoma, what would you guys tell me? And what would you guys think? Probably, I would get answers and replies like, you're insane. Oklahoma would have probably mopped the floor with them or end up playing them somewhat close but still getting the win. What if I would have told you that Navy beat Oklahoma in the very last second by a point, 21-20? Because they did. Navy defeated Oklahoma 21-20 in this ball game. Oklahoma lost probably majority of a lot of transfers in the SEC. I will say that. In the SEC, OU lost probably a lot more transfers than they would have liked. Probably they've lost the most people to the transfer portal out of everybody in the SEC. I can look that up, but it seemed like it because they had half of their roster was gone in that game. So, and Navy was a pretty solid football team in the American Conference, a solid football team. Blake Horvath was no joke. He runs the ball well, and they can run that option well, and they can find a way to slow the game down and have ball control in their favor. And that's what they did. They play with a lot of ball security and ball control, and that's how they got the win over Oklahoma. And Oklahoma was dented. They were beat up, and they did not have a lot of their guys. It was back and forth. Oklahoma had the lead, and they blew it. Navy came back late and beat them 21-20, and everybody was all over Brent Venables at this point. Congratulations to Navy and Blake Horvath on getting the win. Two big-time wins to end the season. They beat Army, and then they ended up the American Conference champion Army. They beat them, and they turned around and beat Oklahoma, an SEC team, in the Armed Forces Bowl. So it ended well with Navy. It ended quite well with them for the midshipmen. But for Oklahoma going into 2025, it provides doubt for them, and that's why I keep saying there's a lot of things that Oklahoma needs, and when it doesn't pan out in their favor, it's like, man, they really, really could have had that one, and they really need that one. You almost start to feel bad for Brent Venables. I like Brent Venables. I really do. I like Oklahoma, and I like Brent Venables, and I like him as a head coach, and I like him as a coach, but at the same time, this season is going to prove that because he's got John Mater at quarterback. He replaces Jackson Arnold, who went to Auburn. He's got John Mater coming in at quarterback. Can John Mater, along with some other guys at receiver and other guys on help on all, can he provide some more help on offense and get some guys in there and that can, through the spring window at least, and have some freshmen step up and provide some high-powered octane offense to put some points on the board? And not only that, can the defense step up as well now that Brent Venables is essentially the defensive coordinator because he's calling the plays for the defense? So can Oklahoma go through that? That's the real big kicker here. We're going to find that out in 2025. But this game was a shocker. It was a back and forth. It was back and forth at first. Oklahoma in the first half was all over Navy, and then Navy ended up sliding back into this one because Oklahoma let their foot off the gas, and you're thinking, what the heck happened in this ball game? Navy won and beat OU. Shocking. And that's why this game is 21-20. The magnitude of this game, 25. Navy versus Oklahoma in the Armed Forces Bowl. Navy defeated Oklahoma 21-20. That is why it's 25, because of how shocking it is. Number 24. Arizona State versus BYU. Another BYU game. And I promise, guys, this is my last BYU game on this list. Arizona State versus BYU. 24 is here. And Arizona State defeated BYU 28-23. I covered this game in Tempe. I said that Arizona State was going to win, and they did, because I thought they were going to be the better team, and they were the better team. Huge win. They were all over BYU at first, but BYU started showing some heart and coming back in the second half. They made it a game again. The crowd stormed the field way too early, and it took them like 15, 20 minutes to get them all off the field for that one final second Hail Mary, only for BYU to miss the Hail Mary and to get stopped. And Arizona State officially won the game, and then the crowd ended up storming the field anyway. It was crazy. It was anarchy, and it was a day that had some upsets in it. And we're going to get to one upset in particular that's higher on this list, and that's at the end of this list, actually. So Arizona State was a better team than advertised, and a lot of people didn't think that. I didn't think that. I had Arizona State dead last with the conference standing projections entering the 2024 year. They ended up fighting. The Utah win really showed me that, hey, this team's a threat, and they showed that they were a threat. And then they started playing teams like Kansas State and blowing them out, and I'm thinking, okay, this team's a threat. This team's a legit threat. Let's see what they do against BYU. They beat BYU. I'm thinking, okay, they beat BYU. This team's a legit threat. They ended up blowing other teams out, and they ended up blowing up Iowa State out in the Big 12 championship. And then you're thinking this team could probably line up against anybody in the country. They ended up making the college football playoff as the Big 12 champion and a bye. They had a first-round bye to the Peach Bowl on New Year's. So Arizona State had a coming-out party against BYU in this ball game. First half, Sam Levitt and Cam Scatteraboo had a show, and they put on a show against BYU's defense that their defense didn't necessarily like. But BYU was like, okay, the Cougars, we're going to hold up. We're going to hold up. We're going to bounce back. We're going to get going. And they got going in the second half, and they got some points on the board, coming back, fought really, really hard, stopped them late, and the defense started coming alive again for Arizona State. They got to give them a couple of stops, and it was a few seconds left. They had to shoot a Hail Mary. It was a 5-point game, and the crowd rushed the field. They stormed the field. Like I said, it took them like 25 minutes to get everybody, 25 minutes to get everybody off the field. It took a long time for everybody to get them off the field. We had games to watch, man. We had Army and Notre Dame and everything, man. It took a long time. And it ended up panning out, panning out in the favor of Arizona State regardless, because they ended up stopping them. But magnitude of the game, the viewership of the game, it was a top 25 game in Tempe. It was everybody was just eyeballs in on this one. It was a tight Big 12 race heading towards Arlington, and Arizona State got the nod and got the leg up on BYU in the end. So that's why this game is 24 on my list. Arizona State versus BYU 24, where Arizona State defeated BYU 28-23. Guys, if you love Pigskin Frenzy, keep plugging along. Subscribe on all platforms and follow along on all platforms. We are close to that listener mark, so keep plugging in on all platforms. We have 3 more games to go over before we conclude today's episode of Pigskin Frenzy and gear up for Tuesday's edition, 203 of Pigskin Frenzy with 20 through 11. But let's keep going. Number 23. You're going to think, Joel, what the heck are you doing? Again, magnitude, hype, and draw. Even though the game was a little bit sloppy on one end, it still ended up being closer, and it was still a memorable game. Ole Miss versus LSU was 23. Horrible for LSU offensively. Garrett Nussmeier played underwhelming, and he will have to change that up again next year, obviously. And then Ole Miss's offense played okay, but not the best. The defense is what really kept LSU in this ball game. LSU's defense, Whit Weeks was all over Jackson Dart. This team was pressuring Jackson Dart. The O-line was getting beat by LSU's defensive line. They were all over the field. and they were all just all in and hammering in on this O-line and this offense, this defense was. Blake Baker and his coaching staff were zeroed in on a lot. They tackled a lot. They got some turnovers when needed, and then they ended up being a solid game for LSU's defense. LSU defeated Ole Miss 29-26 in overtime. Let me tell you something, though. The only time that LSU had the lead was the Kyron Lacey game-winning touchdown. That was it. Garrett Nussmeier, they took it into overtime to tie it up. And let me just set the scene for you. It was back and forth in the fourth quarter. LSU was just giving the game to Ole Miss, but Ole Miss kept giving the game back to LSU. The defense really helped them. Garrett Nussmeier at the last drive of the game ended up making some big-time throws, big-time third down conversions, big-time fourth down conversions. Aaron Anderson came in clutch on their drives, ended up going down to the field, kicking the ball in field goal range, and Damian Ramos got the field goal for him, 26-26 to tie it up. It goes into overtime. Ole Miss gets the ball first. Ole Miss gets stopped in overtime. Gets stopped in overtime. Well, as far as I know, I may be totally, hold on. Let me look real quick. Okay, so, Ole Miss did not get stopped. They got stopped. They got 3 and out, and they kicked a field goal. So it was field goal 3, and it was 26-23. And then, first play of overtime, a seam route to Kyron Lacey. Garrett Nussmeier drops a bomb. Kyron Lacey beats out Ole Miss's secondary, and touchdown. LSU gets their first lead and wraps up the game 29-26. LSU defeats Ole Miss. This was LSU's coming out party in a way, because they were slowly entering the top 10 after this. They beat Ole Miss, and then they broke into the top 10, 5-1. They had to play Arkansas after this, where they handedly beat Arkansas and go 6-1 en route to the A&M ball game. LSU, Ole Miss in this game. LSU needed a win because they were playing sloppy heading into the season. They needed a bounce-back win against Ole Miss, because Ole Miss last year, the 2023 year, with that Jaden Daniels Scorefest show in Oxford, ended up beating them there. And it was tough. It was a tough game for LSU to win. Ole Miss was not the better team. I think they were beat. LSU was not the better team. Ole Miss was the better team this year. Talent-wise and everything, LSU wasn't the better team. Ole Miss was beat up, and it was the heart of LSU's defense, and Jackson Dart was getting pressured and did not have his best game at all. And that's okay. And that's what happens. That happens that way sometimes. But the hype of the game, the magnitude of the game, getting further out into the SEC West picture, it was a rivalry game between both schools, and it was a ranked matchup going in to Saturday night on ABC, Ole Miss and LSU. It was a game where on October 12th had many solid football games on that day. So, I mean, bravo, right? Just bravo. Ole Miss, LSU, solid football game in overtime. The hype was real. The stadium was loud. Walk-off game winner, touchdown Kyron Lacey. LSU gets the win, and it gets their first lead in the game itself. What a game. 23 is Ole Miss versus LSU. Ole Miss versus LSU. As I pull up my notes, excuse me, guys. Ole Miss versus LSU. Well, LSU defeated Ole Miss 29-26 in overtime. Number 23, Ole Miss versus LSU. Number 22, before we go to number 21, 2 more games left. Number 22, Alabama versus Tennessee in the third Saturday of October. This game was electric. It was in Knoxville. This was Kalen DeBoer's first trip to Neyland Stadium and his first taste of the third Saturday of October rivalry, a classic SEC showdown every year. Tennessee defeated Alabama 24-17 in this game, and it was a struggle a little bit for Jalen Milroe and this offense to get going. This Tennessee defense found a way to stick it to them, and they were more physical, and they got to them late when it mattered. Nico Amaliava made some big plays late in the game, scored a touchdown, and it was a back-and-forth game, but this defense was the real kicker here. This was Ryan Williams' first bad game as well. Ryan Williams was the breakout receiver, superstar receiver for the Alabama Crimson Tide in this one, and he did not have his best game, so they shut him down a little bit. They kind of isolated a lot of other key components and areas and receivers for Jalen Milroe. They put a spy on Milroe. They kind of blocked him from doing a lot of damage on the ground, sacked him, or put pressure on him, and then Tennessee ended up getting the win 24-17. This was their second loss of the season. And this is before the time of November. 2 losses before November is not the norm for Alabama, but Nick Saban is no longer there. So you're thinking it's something that they're not used to. It's something that I had to get used to. I am not used to Alabama losing 2 games before November. I was always in the impression of, okay, they it's been 17 years since they've done that and lost that much. And let me go on and tell you something. It happens. You know what I'm saying? It happens. I'm going to go on and tell you this, though. Alabama is going to have to get used to that stuff because Nick Saban's no longer there. But I believe Kalen DeBoer can turn things around and could be a man that brings good home, good wins and good wins for this program and build off of recruiting. And the two losses before November may be a blemish and maybe a thing in the past. Maybe. Who knows? It may not. It may be. I don't know. But I believe in Kalen DeBoer still. Let's just not count him out just yet. But no one was used to it, and no one was used to the Vandy and Bama, the state of Tennessee losing, beating Alabama and all this stuff. So it's kind of rough for Alabama in this one. So Tennessee looked good. They were en route to the college football playoff. Alabama missed the college football playoff. Kind of a weird thing to say that Tennessee made it and Alabama did not. But Tennessee got a good win here, and Kalen DeBoer got a taste of that rivalry. It was a proud, hype game. The crowd was jam-packed. Everybody was hyped. Nico Amaliava was ready. He played clutch. The defense was ready. They were hyped. It drew very well on ABC, and they got they got big time wins in this game. Alabama versus Tennessee, hype game, and not only that, the game after that was Texas and Georgia, the first game, and it was a hype game along with that one too. Final score of this game was 24-17. Tennessee defeated Alabama. Alabama versus Tennessee, and the third Saturday of October is number 22 on our list. Number 21 to conclude today's episode of Pigskin Frenzy. Late November, playoff hopes on the line, and it blew up in their face. Ole Miss versus Florida. I told you the same day as BYU Arizona State, I said that there was one game that shocked a lot of people, and it was probably in a bigger impact than most. It was Ole Miss versus Florida. Number 21 on this list is Ole Miss versus Florida. Florida defeated Ole Miss 24-17. Florida in the second half of the season especially in the second half of the year, had the toughest schedule out of anybody, out of anyone. And Florida played Georgia close. They beat, play-wise at least. They got beat 34-20, but they played them close on play-wise, and Florida got beat. Texas, they got beat by Texas, and you're like, man, when's it going to happen for us? Then they end up playing LSU at home, and they upset LSU. Ended up beating and steamrolling LSU in the fourth quarter and beating and dominating them by double digits in the fourth quarter. And you're thinking, okay, all right, Florida, we see you. I don't think it's going to happen again. Two out of the what it was Georgia, Texas, LSU, Ole Miss, Florida State. 2 out of the 5 ain't bad. Well, make it 3 out of 5 because they ended up beating Ole Miss and Florida State after that. So Florida in the second half of the year ended up playing good. Ended up going to a bowl game. Ended up going 8-5, 9-5 on the year, winning and overachieving in their season goal, beating Tulane, badly beat Tulane, in fact, and they ended up winning. And they ended up winning out and finishing out their year strong. So watch out for Florida heading into 2025. Billy Napier's got a heck of a recruiting class coming in. And we see what Billy Napier is doing down in Gainesville right now. He's not playing. He's trying to build around DJ Lagway. Guys, they ended up beating Ole Miss and crushing their playoff hopes. Ole Miss had 2 tough losses against, LSU, who's LSU, it looked bad late. That loss looked even worse after LSU collapsed late. They lost to Kentucky, Ole Miss did. Lost to Kentucky, an unranked Kentucky that didn't even make a bowl game, and then Florida beats them with Jackson Dart throwing 2 or 3 interceptions in that game. One was a mistake and got called back, or it hit the ground, and then right after that, he comes back on the field and throws an actual interception. So it was just, that game was just made to be in Florida's hands. Ole Miss lost 24-17. A lot of people said, what if this game goes either way? Florida ends up beating Ole Miss, and this game goes either way. And look, it probably could have. It really could have. I think that Ole Miss tried to go so hard and try to just work to get down there, and they ultimately just kind of overlooked some things, and they overlooked Florida, and Florida ended up making them pay for it. Florida played a really good game, upsetting Ole Miss. It shocked the college football world. It knocked Ole Miss out of the college football playoff. Florida was on its heels, just going crazy, storming the field. Ole Miss fans were heartbroken because this was the most talented team they've had in a very long time, and this was a playoff team. It was just heartbreaking for Ole Miss fans to watch and look at what could have been on their season. And this game was the what could have been moment after they lost it. 24-17 was the final score. Florida beats Ole Miss. Ole Miss versus Florida was 21 on our list to conclude the 30 through 21 section of the Frenzy's top 50 games of the 2024 college football season. Guys, that just about does it for Pigskin Frenzy. We're going to post this tomorrow, 30 through 21, on X and Instagram. Go and check it out tomorrow if you don't listen to this episode, but I highly encourage you to listen to this episode today of Pigskin Frenzy. Guys, big thank you for taking some time out of your Thursday to just sit back, watch, and listen to some college football coverage presented by me. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, like each episode, leave comments down below. Spotify, Podbean, and Apple, all you got to do is just share around with others and follow on there as well. X and Instagram at Pigskin_Frenzy. Follow, like the pages as well. You're going to get news and highlights from across college football, NFL on occasion, if you want to read comments and fun stuff. Trivia question, trivia post on Instagram stories. Go and answer today's college football question as well as all things up to date for Pigskin Frenzy. Guys, shout out to you all. Big update, www.pigskinfrenzy.weebly.com. Keep tuning in to the website for regular updates. Guys, big thank you for tuning in today and listening and watching some college football coverage presented by me and some Frenzy top game coverage presented by me. We will be back Tuesday to continue our list of Frenzy's top 50 games of the 2024 college football season with 20 through 11. 20 through 11. We're getting closer to the number one game of our list. March 4th is coming upon us Tuesday. You're not going to want to miss it. 20 through 11 of our list coming Tuesday of college football. And until Tuesday's episode of Pigskin Frenzy, I'm Joel Norris signing off. Have a great weekend. We love you all. We wouldn't be doing this show without Jesus. We love him and we praise him for all things for this show and blessing us with the platform to do this. If you want to come to know Jesus, contact me on all platforms, on X, Instagram, and on the website. We will gladly talk to you about our Lord Jesus and talk to him, because without him, we wouldn't be doing this show. We wouldn't have the platform to do this show. Guys, we're praying for you all. We love you all. As always, stay the course.